next debate, ladies and gentlemen, be it resolved that deficit spending should be abolished. David versus Adrian. David as Prime Minister, Adrian as Leader of the Opposition. Please welcome our Prime Minister to define resolution for us.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Deficit spending, borrowing to look after current account. That is to say, the money that we're going to spend during this fiscal year. And right now, federally, we borrow something in the order of about $100 million a day in this country. And that works out on a $650 billion national debt. And most of that borrowing is used to pay interest on our present borrowing. So we're not using that to advance any spending. We're not using it for social programs. We're not transferring to the provinces or anything else like that. We are simply using it to pay money to the international community, because the predecessors of the current government followed the same thing: borrow, borrow, borrow. So tax the future, mortgage tomorrow, and dump your problems onto the unborn. When Tommy Douglas was the PM of Saskatchewan from 44 to 61, he said, when times are good, we put a little money aside, and when times are bad, we pass the hat. In other words, everybody has to shoulder the austerity and the difficulties at the time. You don't simply dump it into tomorrow. And we don't need to do that. We have $65 billion that we have to borrow. That was $65 billion, by the way, that we gave away through tax cuts, by slashing the GST, by corporation cuts and so forth. That money is available. We can raise taxes. How we raise taxes? Well, that's something we don't have time for right now. But we can cut some expenditures. We can cut the cuts. We can cut the tax cuts. The big problem with borrowing is that if I borrow within my means and I can see the means by which I can pay it back, that's one thing. But when you borrow the international community, you don't know where those rates are going. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First, the government says that deficit spending should be abolished. It shouldn't happen. However, he does mention certain things which quite frankly just aren't true. The Prime Minister says that deficit spending is going toward paying the current interest. Well, it does pay some of the interest on debt that we've already done, but it also helps people. Deficit spending also helps people. For example, the thousands of auto workers that were in the province of Ontario that were helped by bailouts. That was that was because of deficit spending. Healthcare, education for poor, impoverished children, for example. That is also from deficit spending. And the fact of the matter is that sometimes, as everyone knows, sometimes emergencies come up. Sometimes things happen that we can't predict. Financial expenses happen that we can't predict. And just as it's the same for you and I, it is also the same for the governments of the day. And sometimes the governments of the day need the ability to simply say, you know what, we don't have enough money to pay for our current expenses. We need to borrow money. Just as most of us here don't have enough money to buy a house outright and we have to borrow by a mortgage, for example, so does the government. And the Prime Minister said something very, very interesting. I want to take a closer look at that. He said that, deficit spending isn't required because the government has the ability to pay for it through taxes. Well, if the government does have the ability to pay for it through taxes, there is no harm in deficit spending. Deficit spending is fine because the government can get the money back at a later date. The government has the ability to get the money back at a later date. The government can print money, the government can raise taxes, so it's not a matter of deficit spending is bad. Deficit spending is a necessary tool which does no long-term harm to the economics of the country. And there is no real problem in terms when the government borrows money. The government usually is good for it. The government of Canada is good for the money that it borrows. The government of Canada has been borrowing money on and off through deficits for the last 100 150, 160, 100, give or take 150 years. And so far, there haven't been any problems. Government deficit spending is good, deficit spending is fine, deficit spending is happy. Everyone is happy. The children are happy because they can afford to go to school and afford to buy food and afford to buy all the things that the generous government has given them because they have spent their future. But then again, it's their future, so why shouldn't it be spent on them? For these reasons, the resolution should fail.
Tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in that tired point from day to day. He is saying that we should continue to dump things into tomorrow. Well, it's like living with a useless brother-in-law who's been glued to the couch for 50 years, saying, I'll get a job next week, just give me one more loan. Eventually everything will be all right. Well, eventually, in the long run, we're all dead, as Cain said. The day of reckoning is coming, and it's not give or take 150 years, my friend. It's give or take a couple of months. The problem is that we won't know the full effect of this until after this particular election. So, if you say it's for the kids, well, the kids are going to have to pick up the tab for the party that's been going on so long now. And one way of showing some mettle, some resolve, in this generation, for the sins of the last, is to start shouldering that hardship now and start with deficits. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Deficit spending should be abolished. 2 votes for the resolution. 2, 4, 6, 7. And who votes against the resolution? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. That's pretty close, actually. 7. Good job, 7. Good job.